Hi everyone, my name is Marta Suarez. I am the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, and I would like to thank you for joining this special session during the DSA Summit. So I would like to thank our sponsors for giving us the opportunity to organize this DSA Global Summit. And today we are going to have a presentation from Dr. Fisseha Mekuria. He is Chief Research Scientist at CSIR in South Africa. So the presentation that we're going to have today will be about adding intelligence and sustainable business innovation to DSA. So we are going to hear about his particular experience in South Africa and his vision about how dynamic spectrum access will be evolving to have new solutions and impacts. So Dr. Fisseha, thank you for accepting our invitation, and we are very glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you for the opportunity given, and for the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance is our collaborating association, and we really would like to contribute, and we have been given this opportunity to contribute. My name is Fisseha Mekuria, and I come from a Council for Science and Industrial Research, an organization which is funded by the government of South Africa, and doing a number of multidisciplinary research. And actually, CSIR is now celebrating its 75-year birthday. So that will be also, a birthday speech for me and at the DSA. So going to the slides for my presentation. My presentation will be dealing with adding intelligence and sustainable business innovation to DSA. The reason why I say is that we have had Dynamic Spectrum Alliance and Dynamic Spectrum Research, Development and Innovation for several years now. And we need to think about how do we add intelligence to it, plus build also business innovation around it so that those small industries that come up can sustain and innovate on the applications that can be built over Dynamic Spectrum Alliance supported networks that are coming up. So this is a new spectrum mindset, in my opinion. So the main points for the presentation of mine is how do we reduce the network complexity? Because when we are trying to get networks, especially in a rural area where we have low-cost networks to build, then we need to reduce the network complexity and the cost by sharing. Sharing is one of the important aspects in dynamic spectrum, and smart spectrum sharing or intelligent spectrum sharing will make sure that we have a spectrum sharing network which can survive the low cost environment in the rural and underserved areas. And another thing also is that the network that we, for example, on the CSIR side are now building actually also makes sure that we have infrastructure sharing. So that makes the network lower cost. And then there are a number of technologies that are coming to make intelligent spectrum sharing happen. One of them is spectrum sensing, which we will talk later. And the other one is software-defined radios. Both the TV white space networks that we are building now to make spectrum sharing networks in rural areas actually are reconfigurable radios. So that means that we are going towards software-defined radios. And now there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, which should also support this dynamic spectrum sharing in networks that are coming, especially future future wireless networks like the new wireless community, wireless generations that are coming. They need that. So we need to build intelligent spectrum sharing and management toolboxes that we will discuss also later on. And as I said before, we need to sustain the rural connectivity, or the small and medium enterprises who are trying to roll out these networks in rural areas need to be able to survive. So we need to give them the benefit of business models which are surviving. Then there is also regulatory and policy perspectives in the intelligent spectrum sharing and management, which we will discuss also. So as we know, there is a lot of future wireless complexity that is coming. We have seen that there are so many multi-access connectivities that devices have to support. And we have drone communications, we have mobile edge computing, and we have also MIMOs that are coming, all of them going over wireless, which implies that the spectrum scarcity is becoming more and more prevalent, especially in urban areas. But in rural areas, we can see that there is a whole lot of spectrum available. That we found out because we are now building, based on the current static spectrum allocation, there is a TV broadcasting channels in the UHF and VHF channels that are now statically allocated to them, but it's not being utilized, especially in rural areas. And we have found out also with our research and measurements that we have done in long term that there is a whole lot of spectrum which is lying idle, while we are at the same time crying for new spectrum, especially for the new generation networks that are coming. And there are millions of people in rural areas who really lack also connectivity, which implies that we need to go towards dynamic spectrum sharing, dynamic spectrum allocation in the future. So the current static spectrum allocation should change, in our opinion. So one example I can give you is that this is a long-term study that we have done in an area near to Cape Town, Western Cape. We saw that, for example, the channels 21, 20, up to 27, we have studied the whole of the UHF channels, but these are the channels that I want to show you, that there are a number of channels that are lying idle. This is a long-term study that we have done. A spectrogram of the spectrum utilization shows that, for example, channel 21, channel 23, channel 25, even channel 27, for that matter, are freely available for building broadband networks. So we went together with Google and other industry partners and built network at this area in Tigerberg, and connected 10 schools in the area with TV white space broadband networks, and we found out no interference to the TV broadcasting stations. There were a lot of articles that came out and say, you might get a lot of spectrum interference in those areas, but there wasn't. So which shows that TV white space networks can operate together with TV broadcasting stations without any interference being recorded until now. So we have done this work, and we have even repeated the same work with Microsoft and other industry players together in another area in South Africa, northern South Africa, called Limpopo. And we have also shown there that there is no interference happening, and networks can operate with secondary spectrum sharing using the TV white space networks. But what we found out in the end is that if we allow now TV white space networks to come up in thousands, because rural areas in many countries are not connected. So now what will happen is that we need to have some kind of management of these networks, some kind of management that there is no interference. So what we did at the CSIR was we went out and built the technology that can make sure that we don't have interference between the radio devices working in the same area and sharing similar areas of spectrum. Now it is a UHF spectrum. So the model that we have built and the spectrum database that we have built now has the devices, the network devices can access the spectrum, intelligent spectrum sharing and management engine through the PAUS protocol that is standard also, and then can operate, reconfigure the radio devices so that there's no interference between themselves and between the licensed TV broadcasting stations. So we went out internationally to collaborate with Ofcom and other database providers, and Ofcom provided, a process of qualification, and the qualification also had a purpose to build the development of the tools, the standards, and the regulation. And we supported now the regulation to come up in South Africa because of the fact that we had this process of collaboration, international collaboration with Ofcom, and now we can support our regulators, the South Africa regulator, and even other African regulators. We are supporting them to build spectrum regulation for TV white spaces. So, for example, a rural TV white space broadband network could look like this. The one, for example, in Limpopo, built with Microsoft and CSIR collaborating, for example, can have a reference geolocation spectrum database which the regulator owns now. And we have a secondary geolocation spectrum database at present run by CSIR, but in the future it will be a privately owned organization that can run this one. And then that gives spectrum availability, allocation availability to rural network provider, which can provide broadband internet to sectors like the agri center and the schools, the rural schools, and also rural clinics for that matter. So with that, we can improve the connectivity of more rural areas, more unconnected areas in globally, and at the same time provide the possibility to increase their economic development, because broadband has become one of the tools to get improve the economy of rural communities. So with that, we have built a technology offering. For the regulators, we have a reference geolocation spectrum database, so that because the national regulators are the ones who actually manage the spectrum, so they need to have an overview of who is using what in which spectrum is being utilized, and there are interesting implications, because in the future, what we would like to see is that more and more of spectrum sharing coming in, even in other areas, not only in the TV broadcasting bands like the UHF and VHF, but even in other bands. That is one of the aims of this global summit, with a new spectrum mindset to go forward. So the secondary geolocation spectrum database provides spectrum availability information and the power levels for the devices, which the SMMEs, the rural networks providers, can get. And with this, we have a UNDP project now, together with the UNDP, CSIR and UNDP now have launched a big project to support SMMEs roll out these networks to rural areas in South Africa. But in the future, we are going out to other African countries also. One of the sustainability factors that we believe in this, in this ecosystem that we have built, is that we have also provided network planning tool to these small and medium enterprises, which are rolling out network broadband networks and ICT services to rural areas. So network planning tool is very important because these SMMEs are very fragile. They don't have enough money to roll out these networks. So we need to support them. So that is one of the things that we are doing with UNDP now. So the tools that we have developed, for example, for the regulators, looks like this. When you go into the URL that is provided, and you can get type approval information for your devices, which you are going to roll out networks with. You can also get input data set, and we have also the SGLSD service that can be provided to the regulator, and the devices also can be approved through that link. Then the next tool that we have provided for the intelligent spectrum allocation and sharing is that what we call the spectrum switch, the secondary geolocation spectrum database. It can provide the calculation engine to calculate in any area in South Africa. When you go and say provide the location, then this tool, the spectrum switch or the secondary geolocation spectrum, calculates the information for that area and provides available spectrum plus the power levels that you can use with your devices. So in the long term, what do we mean by intelligent spectrum sharing beyond the TV white spaces? Because that is one of the aims of this global summit, is that we can provide spectrum sharing in the IMT band, mid-band, and even millimeter wave bands spectrum sharing. That we can do by having an integrated spectrum, intelligent spectrum sharing and management database, combining the TV white spaces and the license shared access and the spectrum access systems that are already there. We can combine all that into a single spectrum database, which we call intelligent spectrum sharing and management database. And that can be supported because now the things become so complex. So we need to have artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques to support this database, provide the necessary information on real time. And these tools will be supporting the 5G and beyond networks with spectrum toolboxes. And the environment then will become not only mobile network operators, but they will become heterogeneous wireless networks, complementing each other. Where there is a mobile network, the mobile network providers can benefit out of it. But where they can't go because of techno-economics or other issues, then we should be able to provide heterogeneous wireless networks provided like the TV white spaces or even the SAS systems can provide that one. And then there is also a coexistence algorithms which can make sure that the coexistence will be there without interference. So this is a type of research and development that the CSIR is doing, and the new innovations will be there within the next few years. So in summary, intelligent spectrum sharing and management is a must if we are going to guarantee spectrum availability and reduce network costs. And we are doing a whole lot of active research and development, and we are participating in several forums on this one. And Dynamic Spectrum Alliance is one of those global summits that are there. But we are doing this in a way that can support specifically emerging economies, because we need to have sustainable rural connectivities. And that requires that we have good control of the networks cost and the spectrum cost. That's also possible to come in there. And we need to have also business innovation for the small and medium enterprises who are going to be the rural network providers for us. And with the UNDP, we have now started how to make this benefit also the UN Sustainable Development Goals and digital inclusion, become one of the beneficiaries of this involvement between CSIR and UNDP. And we are happy that the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance also is now looking into sustainable development goals. And we really would like to contribute in that as a CSIR. As we celebrate the 75 years, we would like to do that. Regulatory and policy perspective, especially when we go beyond the UHF and VHF bands, the TV broadcasting station, it's very important to look at, because intelligent spectrum sharing and management requires that we have a regulatory and policy perspective working properly. So the intelligent spectrum sharing beyond UHF, beyond the TV broadcasting, beyond TV white spaces, where we have IMT and mid-band and millimeter wave spectrum sharing toolboxes will come, and they will be supporting 5G and beyond in a heterogeneous network environment. So we are happy to be collaborating with DSA as we celebrate our 75 years. The CSIR has just changed its motto also. We are trying to touch lives through innovation, and that requires collaboration, and we are happy to be there for the sustainable development, digital connectivity, and create inclusivity in all this. Thank you very much, and I wish a very fruitful Spectrum Alliance DSA Spectrum project and conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fisseha. That was very interesting, and I really like the long-term vision here. You mentioned it in your conclusions, but I would like to ask you if you could please give us a little bit more details. What is your vision about dynamic spectrum, intelligent dynamic spectrum sharing? What would be the impact on emerging markets, and what is its potential in those emerging markets, emerging countries?
Yes, you're right. I mean, it's a very important issue. I remember, the conference in Bogota, Colombia. We were talking similar issues, on DSA conference in Bogota. We had this, and we never thought that even Latin America and the countries also are looking into dynamic spectrum sharing. And we were able to share our experience with them, and which implies that emerging markets will be the beneficiaries of spectrum sharing or dynamic spectrum sharing in the future. And intelligent spectrum sharing also makes sure that these networks that we provide to emerging economies, the underserved areas in emerging economies, will have quality of service, because unless we guarantee that there is no interference through intelligent spectrum sharing, then the quality of the networks that we build will be poor. And we don't want poor quality to be given even to rural areas. So we need to have dynamic spectrum sharing, but with intelligence. We need to add intelligence to it. Intelligent spectrum sharing and management is a very important issue for providing quality networks even in a rural area, and also provide the possibility of value-added services on top of this, because once we get good quality networks, then it's very easy to add value-added services on top of it. There are a number of value-added services that can come up. This will in turn help the SMMEs, these rural network providers, also grow their economies, grow their business, because they need to add value-added services to the networks that they provide to rural communities if they want to survive in the long term. So intelligent spectrum sharing and management is an important issue to consider when we are dealing with emerging economies and providing digital connectivity, providing inclusivity, digital inclusion, and sustainable development goals. That's what the United Nations is trying to achieve also. I hope
Yes, and now I have another question, if I may ask, Fisseha.
Yeah.
How do you see the relationship between this intelligent spectrum sharing platform, if I can call it like that, and we know that there are different commercial solutions for dynamic spectrum access, like databases. How would that interaction, in terms of like practical implementation in like in different places for ongoing projects? How do you foresee that interaction?
Yes, I think one of the things that I usually tell the industry and the regulators is that we need to work together. We are all in the same ship. Okay, and there is a saying that we are all crews. There is no passenger in the spaceship Earth. That's what I used to call it. And the regulator and the industry and the research institutions, they must work together so that we can get a win-win situation and also provide this emerging economy rural areas with a quality broadband network, and also make sure that they benefit out of it. See, the reason why we were supporting the SMMEs to be a rurally based SMMEs is that we want to support them to come out of this poverty that is there in rural areas. So we need to have the industry also understand that once the economy grows in these rural areas, they will be the ones, the industry will be the beneficiary, because they will be requiring more advanced applications, more advanced value-added services, so that even the industry will benefit. But as long as we leave these rural areas stay in their poverty, they won't be able to buy the next level of services. So the industry also must understand, and the regulator also must understand that we must support the industry to support the SMMEs, to give them the possibility of enough spectrum so that there is. But the possibility of even the regulator understanding that dynamic spectrum is very important, spectrum sharing is very important, comes from the fact that they will be forced now, because of 5G and the other technologies that are coming. They are also requiring high bandwidth, but that cannot be achieved without spectrum sharing and spectrum aggregation, for that matter, because they have to use different spectrum areas and aggregate those to get the high bandwidth services they are promising in the standard. So there is a need for dynamic spectrum sharing. There is a need for intelligent spectrum sharing and management, because it supports the emerging economies, it supports the industry, it supports the regulators to provide enough spectrum for the services that are coming in the future. So that is the reason I'm saying why we need intelligent spectrum sharing and management. I hope I answered your
Thank
question
you.
again.
Yes, and I think from the business perspective, you highlight that when we are talking about connecting those that are still unconnected, it's important to consider like specific and very particular like sustainable long-term models, and that is very important because it's not about like copy paste of different technologies. It's about understanding the reality and the local context in order to
Right.
make it happen. So thank you for that. One final question before we finish this session. What would be your message for regulators that are attending this DSA summit? Sometimes they feel, well, we have heard in this event about those challenges that they face. What would be your message for them? And you already were clear that we need spectrum sharing. How would you advise them to proceed in order to get all the benefits of spectrum sharing?
Yes, I think it's a very important question that you are raising. Regulators have to to be open to discussion, and also very important that they build capacity so that they can understand what dynamic spectrum sharing is bringing in, even for them. So there's a lot of opportunity for them to benefit out of dynamic spectrum sharing and intelligent spectrum sharing, for that matter. But they must be open. They shouldn't be relying on the old static allocation frameworks that they are sitting, many of them, and be open to discuss this both from the research point of view and the business aspect also, from the industry perspective also. So what I mean is that we actually need to support these regulators, especially in emerging economies. They don't have the capacity like the FCC or the Ofcom. They don't have big research and development capacity. So they only rely on the research institutions like the CSIR has been supporting the Independent Communication Authority of South Africa, and we benefited also as the researchers from our side, and the innovation that we have come up is because we have been collaborating with the regulator. So the regulators have to open themselves to discuss with industry, to discuss with research organizations how to bring in dynamic spectrum sharing into the mainstream. Because otherwise they will not be able to provide the spectrum that the new standards that are coming are requiring. And then think also about heterogeneity. So the industry also has to think. Mobile industry only thinks in one way. It has to be a mobile network that can provide this and that. But they must also think that there is Wi-Fi, there is TV-wide spaces to work with. So they must think also heterogeneous networks, because we can't complement each other and provide and cover all areas. We don't need, now the ITU Broadband Commission was saying that there are almost 3.6 billion people who don't have broadband. The reason is that we have been always looking into one focus area of mobile communications, mobile networks. But we need to think beyond that and allow other networks, other type of networks to come in, and those include Wi-Fi, TV-wide spaces, satellite, and all type of networks that can come in. And we can cover the whole earth through that. So,
thank you. Thank you, Fisseha. That's very important, understanding that all the technologies have some benefits and drawbacks, and also how licensing regimes can really enable, exactly, support the adoption of those technologies. So thank you very much. Once again, I would like to also recognize what you mentioned. I think it's very important, that synergy between regulators and research institutions and industry. So I think for us, and particularly for me, it has been very interesting to work with CSIR. It's a shame that not all the countries have a research institution or a specialized institution that could focus on that. And so thank you for sharing that. And it's also a great opportunity to congratulate you for your 75 years. That's great. And I hope you will have many more years working on innovative subjects and new technologies, and advising advising ICASA and other government entities in South Africa.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for this session.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for providing this opportunity for us to contribute, and we hope to collaborate with you in the future.
Yeah. And so thank you everyone who have watched this session. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I invite you also to keep watching all the different sessions and to continue attending the DSA Summit. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.